Hi, friend. Welcome to the Big 4-0. It's Stephanie, and today you've got me all to yourself. My recent conversation with Angela Hwang got me thinking about burnout. I got curious to investigate a few past conversations with people who have experienced burnout and explore how it intersects with two larger themes around the transition we go through sometime around our 40th birthday. Angela Hwang is a high achieving marketing executive and the daughter of Korean immigrants. She spent decades chasing a version of success that she finally realized was not her own. And at age 40, a health crisis and the demands of motherhood forced her to confront the costs of living by somebody else's definition of the American dream. Don't worry if you haven't listened to that episode yet. It's not a prerequisite for being here, and I will not pop a quiz because this isn't so much a recap of that story as something I was inspired to dig into after talking to her. And I'm going to dig deep into the masks we wear and the voices we silence. So many of us spend our first decade or two of adulthood doing all the things we think we should be doing. We chase degrees, careers, promotions, paychecks, stability, approval. We build careers, families, retirement accounts. We check every box we were handed by someone older and wiser than us. And for most of us, it works for a while, until it doesn't. Somewhere in our late 30s or early 40s, the wheels start to come off. Not for everyone, and not always dramatically. Usually it starts with a whisper, a quiet, but maybe persistent question bubbling at the back of your mind. Is this really it? But sometimes we don't hear the whispers, and our first clue feels like getting hit with a sledgehammer. Here's how my guest Tara McFarland put it.
There's this great quote that I heard in a personal growth and development class where it's like the universe will whisper to you, and then it might get a little louder and it might start talking to you. And then it might kind of like tap you on the shoulder. And then eventually you need a big whack with a 2x4 to wake up. So I'm the 2x4 variety.
I too was a 2x4 girl in my mid to late 30s. I've told the story before about the job situation that I was in at the time starting to deteriorate, but I was committed to making it work and succeeding at all costs. Meanwhile, my body was screaming at me to listen to it instead of my bullhead. And I had to be told that I was having panic attacks every night before bed. So there was that. But don't let me get too far off track. What I want to do today is examine how burnout intersects with two larger themes we face at midlife. The first theme is the invisible cost of doing everything right. When we follow the script that someone else sets out for us, we can end up far from where we truly want to be. And often, it takes us a while to realize that. The second and related theme is learning to tune into and then trust your own voice. For much of our lives, we listen to those people that are older and wiser than us, our parents, teachers, bosses, mentors, even society at large, to understand what is expected of us and what path we need to follow to become healthy, happy, successful, and safe. The problem is that we, again, can end up somewhere that doesn't fit or feel good to us. And this transition is about unlearning those two things and tuning into our internal wisdom to guide us to a place that truly fits. Let's go back to Tara for a minute. In high school, she loved history. She was artistic, a ballet dancer, and self-proclaimed super girly. But she grew up in a science-focused family. And as she got closer to college, she kept hearing, "What are you going to do with a history degree?" Her parents told her the only thing she could do with a history degree was become a teacher, and she knew she didn't want to do that. So her parents guided her to engineering. They told her, "It's a solid degree, you'll always have a job, you'll be stable and secure, and you'll get paid well. You're good at math, why don't you just do that?" So she did. And like I said at the beginning, it worked for a while, right up until it didn't. She became that high-achieving engineer who had done everything quote-unquote right. But the pressure to keep up that facade, the performance of capability, eventually broke her down, literally, very similar to Angela, whose doctors told her she was pushing her body so hard she was having symptoms of strokes. Tara's body refused to play along. Here she is.
I had no idea what stress did to my body. I had a talk with my supervisor and my superior about a certain meeting that I had been in on this big project that I was managing, about how I looked angry the whole time that I was in the meeting. I didn't even really talk in that meeting. I took notes. So I thought I was doing well because I was just sitting there taking notes, but I had offended some guy who had 35 years experience. And they felt like they had to talk to me. It was in that moment that I was sitting there talking to both of them, feeling like I wasn't being heard. I think a lot of what I felt like I was running up against was like, I feel like no one's hearing me and I wasn't feeling supported in this. I just felt I keep being told I need to change something, except I really don't know how to change it. I just remember going home that day and taking a sick day. I started crying in that meeting. It was such a mess. I just started to break down.
This is how the script gets written for us, quietly and with the very best of intentions. But it's insidious. And for a long time, we don't even know that it's programmed into our operating system. So this kind of burnout is more than just being tired. It's more than needing a vacation. It's existential. And it shakes your identity. And someone who knows a little bit about that in particular is my guest, AdaPia D'Errico. AdaPia hit burnout at age 38 after years of tying her identity to high-achieving roles in finance and startups, only to realize that even success couldn't protect her from feeling lost when her capacity to perform collapsed. Her midlife transition became a reckoning with ego, self-worth, and the quiet inner wisdom she'd long ignored in favor of being capable and accomplished. Listen to what she said.
It felt like the only thing that I was always so sure about, which was my ability to succeed, wasn't working. And it felt like the floor fell out from under me because I always knew I could count on myself to succeed, to get things right, to do things well. And so what it felt like was, now I really don't know who I am. I'm no one, because if I can't work, I'm like useless. What am I going to do?
When things are stressful or things are crazy, we cope with capability.
Absolutely.
Like we cope by just getting it done and checking stuff off the list and being so capable and managing it all. And if you got to a point where you were like, well, God damn it, I'm not even capable.
That's right.
I can't do anything. Yeah, that's going to be a heart stopper. For many of the women I've talked to, burnout wasn't a sign they were failing. It was the signal they needed to realize that they had to be done playing someone else's game. Because if they kept going on like this, things were going to get even worse. Jennifer Arthurton, another one of my past guests, spent decades succeeding by everyone else's standards until the whole thing fell apart. Listen to what she said.
Probably the greatest realization for me when I was in my bed, unable to get out, forced into a place of stillness. We are given the rule book, especially as women, we are given the playbook early on, right? Mm-hmm. It's like, go to school, get good grades, get a good job, work your way up the corporate ranks, somewhere in there, get married, have a kid, check, 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 check. I was checking all of the boxes. I was like the good girl, right? Like the good student.
Yep.
And I realized that nowhere along the way had I ever stopped to check in to see if it was what I wanted. Like what made me happy, like what fulfilled me. So I kept going like, okay, I'm going to achieve more. But the more was never satisfying because I was more of the wrong thing. Like, they say you put the ladder against the wall and you climb the ladder when you realize, oh my God, I'm on the wrong wall.
In her 40s, Jennifer began to feel a quiet dissatisfaction beneath the surface of a life that looked perfect on paper. She had a successful career, a stable family, all the right boxes had been checked. But by age 50, everything unraveled, almost all at once, forcing her to confront the painful truth that doing everything quote unquote right had led her to a life that wasn't actually hers. The cost of doing everything quote unquote right is that we often lose ourselves in the process. And when the masks come off, when the identities slip away, wife, mother, executive, helper, we're left with the terrifying question, who am I really? Here's Jennifer again.
By all measures of anything outside of myself, I was living the perfect life. Like, I got to go to Olympic events. I was standing on stage with Lady Gaga. Like, I had these incredible experiences. I was really well paid. And there was still this like little niggling inside me that I would shut it down. And I shut it down over and over and over again.
Yeah.
Until I really had no choice. And what happened was, in the year leading up to my 50th birthday, so starting from age 49, all in within under a year, I found myself divorced, an empty nester. My kid moved 3 hours away to go to school. I was let go from my career, and I was bedridden with a stress-related illness.
Oh, God. Well, the universe had your attention.
Oh, boy, did it ever. And it was as though all of my identities, who I thought I was in the world, was literally stripped away from me in a very short space of time. And I found myself, like, most days I couldn't get out of bed. I was mentally, physically, and emotionally completely spent.
Yeah.
And I would lie in my bed and, like, first of all, throwing myself a big old pity party. Like, what's wrong with me? Everybody else has got their shit together. Why is my life crumbling?
Right.
And then what I realized was, like, if I'm not a wife, if I'm not a mother, if I'm not a corporate executive, then who am I? Right? Like, who am I? That question just kept coming up over and over and over again. Yeah. And then the other part was, I had no idea what I wanted for my life. If I wasn't consumed with all of these things, then what was I going to do with the rest of my life? And I truly, at that point, believed that this was the beginning of the end for me.
My guest, Julie Hutsell-Starling, also realized she had built a life around seeking approval, both in her relationships and in her work, until burnout and chronic exhaustion forced her to confront the truth that she was living out of alignment with herself. So her midlife transition became a process of reclaiming self-trust, rediscovering her inner fire, and learning to stop compromising on what truly mattered to her. Here's what she said.
So this deficiency that I felt inside, I felt like I had to prove myself. Yep. What I learned over time was that all of the things that I was doing for myself, they weren't from a place of love.
What were they from?
Fear and anxiety, the scarcity, not enoughness. You know, it wasn't because, oh my gosh, body, I honor you, I love you, and I know that this is what will make you so happy right now. Such a different energy than, if I don't do this, then I have to fit this in, because if I don't do this, then I'm not going to sleep tonight, or I won't be able to make it through my day today.
The truth is, we are not meant to be the same person for our entire adult lives. This transition, this midlife reckoning, it isn't a crisis. It's a calling to stop outsourcing your worth to someone else's approval, to stop chasing someone else's version of success, and to come home to yourself, even if it's for the first time. So if you're feeling that fog, if you're lying in bed wondering if you can do it one more day, you are not broken. You're just being asked to listen a little bit closer. Because that external validation that you've been performing for the past 15 or 20 years is actually a mirage. If your okayness is contingent on someone else's say-so, then it's weak. It's conditional. It's unreliable. Outside approval can be given one day and taken back the next, which means you're at the mercy of someone else's whims, whether they wield those whims with integrity or not. Can you think of anything that you've been chasing that disappears just when you think you've arrived? Let's hear rapid fire from a few of my past guests, what they had to say on the topic. First, back to Jennifer Arthurton.
For most of my entire life, I was trying to prove my own enoughness. If I had a certain job title, I was successful. If I had a certain salary or a certain type of house or I drove a certain type of car, that was like, hey, world, look how good I am. But you can't, no matter how many Band-Aids you put on top of the not enoughness wound, you will never, ever, ever feel enough.
And Tara McFarland.
If I feel like I'm effective, then I will be happy. And I was constantly searching for that outside of myself in a job by seeking out promotions.
And my most recent guest, Angela Hwang.
It was a way of me showing, okay, this is where I am in the corporate ladder. When you're in big cities like Silicon Valley, you want to differentiate yourself and say, I work hard, I have this job, and I have to show that I'm successful to other people. One of the best, unfortunately, way to do it is to own material things that kind of support your story. So I was falling into this trap of, I deserve this. I'm going to spend my money on this because I deserve it. This is why I'm burned out. This is why I'm stressed out. And yeah, this is how a director should be dressed, or this is what a CMO looks like.
And AdaPia D'Errico.
I propped myself up with capability until that rug was pulled right out from under me.
Yeah.
And then all I had was myself.
And Julie Hutsell-Starling.
I was always looking for approval and affection. The same thing that was driving me in relationships was driving me in work as well. So this deficiency that I felt inside, I felt like I had to prove myself.
Jennifer's realization came after decades of following the good girl script of success. Career, marriage, family. Her burnout forced her to acknowledge that her life had been built for someone else's definition of enoughness. Angela had to come to terms with the fact that she had built the life her parents prescribed, and that prescription was born of their own fears. For AdaPia, a deep physical crisis became a lightning bolt moment. She recognized her identity had been built around being productive and capable. And when that collapsed, she had to confront a life she had unconsciously constructed to meet external expectations. So let's be clear. Burnout doesn't always come in the form of collapse. I mean, it can, but sometimes it looks like crying in your car after another quote unquote successful presentation, or feeling hollow in a meeting when you're supposed to feel proud, or wondering why the life you worked so hard to build feels more like a trap than a triumph. So the first step in reclaiming your life is listening to those signals, no matter how scary they seem, and daring to ask whether the version of success that you are living still fits. All right, let's work through three patterns, if you will, of burnout that have emerged from my guests' stories. Number one, quiet discontent that won't go away. Jennifer kept pushing away the question, is this it? Julie felt like a square peg in a life that looked good but felt wrong. And Angela woke up one day and realized, I never questioned the milestones, I just kept going. So let's be real. It's just us chickens here. You don't have to share your answers with anyone but your own self. Let me ask you two questions. Are you experiencing a quiet, maybe even persistent dissatisfaction, even when things seem objectively good? And is there any part of you whispering, something's off? Because it doesn't have to be that way. And it doesn't mean that you have to blow up your life either. The second pattern is the body breaks down. Tara couldn't turn her neck. Mindy Aisling had panic attacks in car washes. Jennifer was bedridden with adrenal fatigue after ignoring years of signs. And AdaPia had a sudden and vicious relapse of her Crohn's disease after being symptom-free for 2 decades. How about you? Are you getting any feedback from your body that you're ignoring? Are you completely oblivious to nightly panic attacks for more than 6 months like I was? Where is your body asking you to slow down, even if your mind won't listen? Are you overriding fatigue, tension, or illness in order to just keep going? And I know, we're all tired, we're all exhausted, but are you truly overriding your body? The third pattern is an identity crisis when roles fall away. AdaPia said, I can't identify myself anymore, and so I don't know who I am, and that's really scary. Tara said, my whole identity was wrapped up in engineering. Like, who am I if I'm not this female engineer climbing the corporate ladder? Jennifer said, if I'm not a wife, if I'm not a mother, if I'm not a corporate executive, then who am I? Considering these statements, do you think you could be brave enough to reflect on what would be left if your title, role, or responsibilities disappeared tomorrow? Have you confused what I do with who I am? And don't worry, a lot of us have. You are not alone in that. In fact, you're in some pretty freaking good company considering the women I'm pulling back in today. All right, so now that we've gone through that, I just want to point out that burnout doesn't just destroy. It also cracks things open. It creates opportunities to do things differently. Julie Hutsell-Starling said it really well.
Truly, the answer to healing burnout is learning to love yourself all the way around.
Wow.
100% inside out.
And Mindy Amita Aisling was very thoughtful on the topic as well.
That part of me had to die, and I had to go through the grieving process. And I had to get angry about it, and I had to be in denial about it, like all the stages of grief, to let go of this person that I wasn't anymore. Because as long as that person was in the way, I was never going to become that sort of future version of myself. And I saw that.
Yes.
And so then it just became the process of allowing myself to grieve for that and say goodbye to who that person was.
When she was 35, Mindy was in a devastating car accident that shattered her body and her sense of control. She tried to rebuild her life by clinging to structure, success, and external security, but it was only through burnout and the ensuing emotional unraveling that she began to question who she really was and committed to living with radical authenticity and self-compassion. So, what do we do when we start seeing these signs? We start listening for something we've ignored for a very long time, our own voice. Which brings me to the second theme I wanted to explore today, learning to tune into and trust our own voice. This is a big part of the reset we do when we cross the threshold into midlife. And I know you hate that term, but it's true, at least mathematically. I've said this before, it's this time of life, sometime before, around, or after your 40th birthday, when you start to turn down the volume of all the external voices telling you what they think you should be doing. Because by now you've got 15 or so years of experience as a full-grown adult. It's around this time when you start to hear the things people tell you you should be doing, and you react, maybe even just internally, because you know they're wrong. And maybe not objectively wrong with their suggestions, but wrong for you. And an interesting thing happens when you turn down the volume on what everybody else is saying. You start to make room to hear the voices coming from inside the house. And at first, you're going to think those voices, whoever they are inside your head, are crazy. But I can tell you from personal experience that the crazier the idea, the more true it is for you. So it may take some time to start trusting that voice, and it doesn't always speak to you literally or in fully formed, coherent thoughts. It might just be giving you glimmers or directional signage. Or it could be telling you to burn down your life. I've talked to those people too, but I'm trying not to scare you here, so we'll leave them for another day. So if I think about the moment when each of these women stopped looking outward for answers and began listening inward, hearing their own voice wasn't a light switch moment. It was more a slow, sometimes painful, but definitely courageous process. But once they started trusting that voice from inside, things began to shift. Let's go back to the ladies for some examples. AdaPia described her burnout as an ego implosion that forced her to stop relying on her external identity. She turned to yoga, meditation, and deep self-reflection, not to feel better, although it did that as well, but mostly to hear her inner truth again. Here she is.
I eventually landed on that's just what I do. So what I do is very distinct from who I am. And that's only possible by doing the self-reflection.
Say that again, because that's the important part.
Yeah.
What I do is separate from who I am.
Yeah.
And I think so many of us sort of sleepwalk into our identity being connected to something in our lives, whether it's the job or motherhood or fatherhood or a hobby or even a passion. And if you think I am that, then it might be an area of concern.
And we can only make that distinction by spending so much time with ourselves.
She trained herself to feel her intuition as physical truth, a yes in the body, a no in the body. And that's how she built trust from the inside out. Julie's journey was marked by years of ignoring her intuition, especially in toxic relationships. But over time, and with energetic healing and breath work, she reconnected with her power. Here's what she said.
It was literally like I refound my fire. And for the first time in my life, I started respecting myself.
She went from asking everyone else for answers to declaring, I know what I need. I won't compromise again. Mindy's trauma from her car accident made her seek external safety through control, money, and overachievement. But her anxiety and burnout were signals that something deeper was off. Here she is.
I think really for me, the fear that arose from that experience, it led to me just wanting a lot of control or the illusion of control. And thinking that if I pursued a more normal, quote unquote, path in life, got the right job, made the right amount of money, had the right bank account, that I would feel safe again.
Yeah.
And the opposite ended up happening. I ended up overworking myself, right? In the chase of this illusion of being able to construct a reality where I'd be safe all the time.
She committed to a daily practice of tuning in, whether through journaling, sitting under a tree, or noticing when her body said no. Angela realized she had built a life around fear and approval, fears inherited from her parents that weren't necessarily founded for her life. She only began to hear her own voice after rest and nervous system healing created space for it. Here she is.
You know, it's as funny as it is. I think once I started to sleep, to be honest, once I started to get some sleep and I actually have time to think, it just all like, I know it sounds so simple, but for all these years, I was just running. I just kept running. I didn't give myself that time to even think. I just didn't have that luxury of thinking. And once I had started to actually get proper sleep and have time to just sit and think and start writing down what my strengths are and what I want in my career versus what I don't want, and okay, how am I going to get there and what changes am I going to make? I just started writing and I thought, okay, this is what I want. And I think that also, for like the elder millennials, we're sort of like the ones that just turned 40 or about to, I think that we also are the generation that quote unquote did everything right. We were told to do this, and then you can buy a house, you can do all this. And a lot of us are just finding out at 40, oh, wait, so I did all of that and more. I went above and beyond, and I don't see it. I don't see the reward. And maybe it's time to put ourselves first and our happiness first and really understand, okay, is it my parents' voice? Is it the extended family? Is it the society? Or is this really what you want? And I feel like we never question it.
Jennifer's voice was buried under decades of performance and perfectionism. She heard it for the first time while sobbing on a meditation mat. Here's what she said.
It was probably 4 or 5 of those 8 weeks I spent on the mat crying with no idea why I was crying.
Right.
But at some point I was like, okay, well, quite obviously I can't stop this. So I'm just going to let it happen and see where this goes.
Right.
And that was the beginning of like releasing so much stuff that I had been so busy pushing down, which is exactly what led to my burnout.
She kept showing up week after week until the inner voice was strong enough to guide her toward purpose. Tara began hearing her own voice only after her body shut down and her high-achieving identity cracked wide open. A body worker / coach gently led her toward introspection and eventually to a 3-day personal development course that changed everything for her. Here's how she described it.
It takes very little effort to show up as yourself once you like really grounded in this is who I am and this is what I stand for and these are the things I want to do.
Letting go of certainty made space for self-trust. Are you starting to see the patterns here? This isn't about quitting your job, moving to Bali, or starting a goat farm, unless for you it is. But it's more about noticing the places where the old rules no longer apply and having the courage to ask, what's true for me now? Burnout isn't failure. It's a threshold. And on the other side is a life that doesn't just look good, but feels right because it's finally your own. Okay, friend, thanks for being here with me today. If after listening to this, you find yourself lying in bed wondering who you are or why you're here, like big picture here, or if you've accidentally built a life you now want to set on fire, welcome. You are absolutely in the right place. Because I'll say it again, burnout isn't a failure. It's just your soul going on strike until you start listening. If this episode poked something in you, come say hi. I want to hear about it. I'm on Instagram at thebig40, or you can find me at thebig40.com and spell out all those little words. I'll be the one whispering, you're not crazy. You're just waking up. I'll see you next time.